How's it going? Been sick. I've been sick really since yesterday. Just haven't felt very good. Haven't had a whole lot of energy to do anything. But kind of forcing myself to work today. I have to go uptrieve. I have to go in Aptrieve the ROA, Register of Actions from the 35th District Court. I have to go pick that up here before they close. The ROA that the city of Wayne has through the 29th District Court versus what the 35th District Court has submitted, right? So just to give you a little background, after the arraignment, the 29th District Court, Judge Brita O'Leary transferred the case over to the 35th District Court. She reclused herself from the case, and she sent the case over to the 35th District Court. So the 35th District Court, since the arraignment, has been the sole how do I say, they're the one dealing with and handling the ROA, right? They're the sole chef, so to speak, right? It's their soup, in other words. The 35th District Court has stated on the record that they have submitted over 11 pages of ROA during this case, to which the city of Wayne only has 7 or 8 pages of ROA. So we have 2 or 3 page discrepancy between the ROAs, and theoretically they should match, right? The 35th District Court has been handling the ROA and has been submitting everything to the 29th District Court. So in theory, because the ROA started under the 29th District Court, it actually should be larger. You see, the 29th District Court ROA should have more details and more pages, at least the same as the 35th District Court. But we're talking our 2 or 3 page discrepancy, which leads me to think that, well, we have certain proof of it. We've already seen it through the 29th District Court is cooking the ROA, their version of it at least, right? And so basically we're going to get the 35th District Court's ROA and we're going to compare it to the 29th District Court ROA. And really we got to get it for all 5 cases though, all 5 charges. Each charge has its own ROA, right? So we're going to do the same thing like in federal court, right? We're going to do the same thing. Every violation is its own lawsuit, right? Or, you know, within reason, right? Within reason, because what the city of Wayne has done is not reasonable at all. You know, they could have easily put these 5 charges under the same case or 2 case files, right? But they did 5 case files because they really want to, you know, the process is the punishment. Each charge is its own case, which means it's its own money, right? So it's not hard, you know, just follow the money, follow where the money goes, and that'll point you, you know, 99% accuracy of where you need to be. But obviously there's some, you know, vindictive and malice reasons as well, but primarily this just comes down to money, right? And you know, typically you wouldn't have 5 cases, 5 charges, especially when those charges, you know, it was May 9th or July 10th, right? Those are the only 2 dates at question here. So why is there 5 different cases, right, for the same days, right? When you could just put all the charges under one case. But you know, the whole process is designed to be obtuse and to be obstructive and to essentially, you know, create what's called Kafkaesque conditions, nightmarishly complex and confusing conditions, right? and sprinkle in a little bit of void for vagueness doctrine violation, vagueness doctrine, just fill that in too, and it's what you're left with. You're left with this shit, and you got to try to navigate it, right? This shit sandwich. So that's what we're up against, and obviously we're gonna, hold bad actors accountable, as we always do. And one way to do that is to compare the ROAs. The other way to do that is to get the entire transcript, all of the police reports, all of the fire reports, as well as all of the body-worn camera transcriptions, right? So transcripts from those videos, and you compile all that data together, and then you analyze it and find discrepancies, right? And then you also have, other people examine it as well, run it through their thought process, and then it, basically you come up with a plethora of violations. You come up with a plethora of issues to bring up and, solidify to the court, right? So there's a lot of discrepancies here that simply, they're easily explainable. They're extremely explainable. But in order to explain them, you have to, there's one of two things here, right? It's either that this is all a coincidence and the city of Wayne just put all of these perfect ingredients into motion unknowingly. But that wouldn't be the case, because the city of Wayne has a documented history of malicious prosecution, right? They have a documented history of civil rights violations. That's the Blackwell versus Noserini case, right? 2022, where, fuck their relationship now, because, Mark Blackwell, he cucked out to the city of Wayne. The city of Wayne gave him a settlement, and he cucked out. But it still doesn't change the facts of that case. And that case proves undoubtedly that the same people that still work in the city of Wayne, because I know Lisa Noserini's not there, but Diane Webb's just an uglier version of Lisa Noserini. But also, Finley Carter, who was the lieutenant back in 2022, well, he's now the deputy chief of police. So, he got promoted a couple positions to violate Mark Blackwell's rights. He lost his qualified immunity. He should have lost his job. That should have been the end of it. But I don't know. I guess nobody... The way Mark Blackwell was trying to fight for the city of Wayne, trying to get Lisa Noserini out there, well, he had to take the heat for it, right? Well, nobody else wanted to back him up, I guess. Which, like I said, the city of Wayne is full of cocks, right? Once you understand that the city of Wayne, Michigan, the reason it sucks so much ass here, the reason it sucks ass and the reason it is the way it is large in part because the city of Wayne is full of cucks, right? Back in 60, 65, the city of Wayne got cucked. The city of Wayne got cucked long before 1960. The city of Wayne tried numerous times to expand its border to increase the size of its landmass, and the state of Michigan at every corner cucked the city of Wayne and told them no. This is what you get, little boy, and this is all you get. And the city of Wayne, I guess, doesn't want to accept their cuck status, right? Because that's what the city of Wayne is. The reason why nobody fights back in the city of Wayne, despite the fact that I've demonstrated over and over and over again that the city of Wayne is run by incompetent, vindictive, malicious retards, right? People that are, first of all, incompetent, but they're maliciously incompetent. I've displayed that at every turn, that the city of Wayne and its council, the reason they don't know what they're doing, or so it would appear, is because they're doing illegal shit. When you're doing illegal shit and you're trying to defend such illegal acts, which the city of Wayne, like I said, their lawyers have it cut out for them, because their lawyers, right, like Melanie had to go and lie the other day at our previous hearing, she had to go and lie and say just total nonsense, right? That the city of Wayne, like that I used to have a fenced-in pool before I bought my house. That's complete, utterly bullshit, right? The city of Wayne has been watching that house um, quite extensively since it was built, and every permit has been pulled for that house, especially prior to me. Um, so the idea that there was somehow a fence that fenced in my pool previously, it's just complete and utter nonsense. The fact is there was no permit because there was no fence. There never has been a fence. But the city of Wayne has to lie to their council, and then I guess unknowingly, their council has to lie to the courts. Well, that alone is enough for me to go no. I can amend my argument. Anything that's unclear or needs correction or needs elaboration, I can amend my complaint, but it still doesn't change the fact that the city of Wayne lied on the record, or at least their council did unknowingly, lied on the record and said that there was a fence. Because we can solve that problem really easily. I mean, I could call, we could get contact with the previous owner, guy who built the house, right? Pulled every permit for that house, and we can see. But we'll be right back, guys. Yeah, so I don't know. We got something here, I guess. I don't know if it's exactly what we want, though. But I got what they would give me. They said this is the judge's notes or ROA or something, but I don't know. I kind of feel like there was more to it, but we will have to compel the circuit court to obtain this information. Because, yeah, there's, you know, the information that's being inputted and what's being regurgitated back out, they don't have. And, the ROA, guys, there's entire motions missing, not even referenced, right? Like, motion to compel discovery was granted several times, and it's mysteriously missing, just miraculously missing altogether from the City of Wayne's ROAs. So it's kind of if what actually happened, right, and what shows up in the ROA are not the same, well, then that's obviously a discrepancy. That's a problem. That's a big problem. But at least the 35th District Court and the 29th District Court, I don't know what their relationship is. You know, I don't know what kind of relationship they have. But I gotta say, though, it must be a pretty decent one, guys. If they can just withhold video discovery for 6 months, you know, not even give video discovery until after the case is concluded. You know, the July 5th incident especially, they want $251,000 for information leading to July 5th. Just that one day, which again, I know that's kind of when everything climaxed, was back, you know, around that time. But, you know, that's when the decision was given to arrest me and to, you know, to criminally charge me. I mean, that's when the floodgates opened, right? Of course, with, you know, actual physical arrest. Even though I was previously arrested twice, once on May 9th, which I do remember. There's a video of it. May 10th, I don't remember, even though I was arrested as the paperwork says I was. But I wasn't notified of my arrest or notified of these other charges, this threatening telecommunications charge. Of course, that the Michigan State Police didn't want anything to do with, so they bunted that back to the City of Wayne, and yeah, the City of Wayne ended up dismissing those two charges because there was no evidence for them. Let's be frank here. There was zero evidence for any of them. There was no evidence for May 9th. It was completely unlawful encounter, completely unconstitutional. And as was the charge on May 10th. There was no probable cause for any of these charges. And it all stems from illegal misconduct, police misconduct, and really a citywide misconduct, 1983 Monell style misconduct. And it's a 1983 all day, just for the simple fact that there was no codified ordinance that existed on May 9th, 2025, that gave them the authorization to do whatever the hell they did. Fourth Amendment says you can't do it, and you don't even have a codified ordinance. So that's a bit of a problem, and for the city to continuously ratify the conduct that happened on May 9, 2025 is really, it's despicable, really. It was retaliatory prosecution, and it was vindictive, and it was malicious. I believe that my case is, I mean, certainly malicious prosecution. That's, you know, in this case, the only theory that it could be, as far as like, okay, there's no probable cause, the charges ended in your favor, there was no codified ordinance. I mean, that's malicious prosecution all day long. But really, it's vindictive prosecution as well, because I was engaged in a constitutionally protected activity, and I was targeted for it, and I was discriminated for it, and I was ultimately prosecuted for simply exercising my rights. My right to run for office, to petition my government, to redress my grievances with my government, and also to, engage in constitutional speech, right? Religious activity. So, that's pretty easy to explain, but the vindictive prosecution, but retaliatory prosecution as well, retaliatory enforcement, selective enforcement, because there are people all around me that have the same style of fire pit, and they've never suffered, anything like that. Just me, only me. So whenever the city of Wayne's errand boy calls, his name's Dennis Daniels, and he lives at the corner of Glenwood and Laurenwood, lives on the corner there in the blue house with the red F-150 in the driveway, and the black Chrysler Town & Country. But yeah, when this person, who is this Mr. Dennis Danielson, just some jack off that took him 50 years to get his VA disability or whatever, and he's upset at the younger generation. He's a Navy cuck too, right? A Gavy, that's what I call him, Gavy. But he's one of them Navy cucks, Navy Blue Falcon. So he already wears the blue uniform, so he's already halfway there. But basically, whenever he calls, right, the city of Wayne comes responding. So whenever he calls in regards to my property, right, because he only complains about my property. His neighbor, his literal next neighbor, can have a 55-gallon drum burning in her driveway, in her front yard, and he doesn't have any issue with that. He takes no issue with his actual neighbor having an open burn in front of her house in her driveway. Has no issue with that. We have that on video. We have a picture of that. But while I was sitting in jail, he had no issue with that. But he's got tremendous issue with my property, which is at least 700 plus feet away, 4 properties down. So this guy isn't a neighbor. So every time the police or the fire department come out and falsely claim that a neighbor is having an issue with me, a neighbor, well, that's not factually true. Dennis Danielson isn't my neighbor, but he's the person who keeps calling the police on me and my family. And like I said, I don't know if he's got some Epstein level shit on the city of Wayne. I don't really know, but he seems to have some sort of pull down there, because whenever he calls and complains, or his fat ugly wife calls and complains, the city of Wayne, they send the cavalry in, right? They send the not just the infantry, right? They send field artillery, they send the cavalry, they send everybody, right? Calgary, I don't know, no, that's a city, but no, they send the whole team, the whole squad, right? The whole police department was on my property on May 9th, or May 19th especially. But May 9th was the day that the police, or the city of Wayne, called themselves out to my house. We have that video, and so the city created its own exigency. I use that with air quotes, the term exigency, because it wasn't, but they tried to, I guess. They attempted to create their own exigency through Dearborn. They used Dearborn as a proxy to violate my rights. So they routed it through 3 departments or so, and I guess that somehow invalidates the violation, or they think it covers it up or something. I don't really know the crackhead logic, the meth head logic that they deployed, but that's my best understanding of it. Because honestly, guys, I don't like to think too much into this stuff, how do retards think, because you might become retarded yourself by trying to think of their twisted logic, right? How they justified it in their brain, right? The mental gymnastics that they had to engage in. I'd rather, keep it simple and, surface level here. I'd rather not really dig too deep into it, although I must confess I have. Against my better judgment and my better will, I have thought about these things to quite extensive thought, and there just isn't any normal person logic here, right? This is, like I said, if you're looking at it from the lens of a malicious, vindictive, retaliatory sort of way, then everything makes perfect sense. But when you try to think about this case, in these cases logically, right, from a legal standpoint, like, okay, was there any legal basis for any of this? Did any of this have any legal validity whatsoever? Well, obviously not, because May 9th was the initial encounter. That's what initiated the entire proceeding that took place. And on May 9th, there couldn't even have been probable cause. Legally, from a possibility mathematical standpoint, it was mathematically, legally impossible, in fact, to have probable cause for May 9th, because there was no codified ordinance to enforce, and there was no emergency, there was no exigency. A smoldering fire pit that's producing what you consider a nuisance level of smoke is not a exigency or emergency per se, right? It's just simply not. It could be an annoyance. It could be, you could call it a nuisance, even though legally it wasn't a nuisance either. But that seems to be the city's position, is that it was a hazard and a nuisance. Well, those are two different things. So a hazard is something that can cause life or death, right? Well, the problem with the city's argument with that one is the certificate of occupancy, that fire pit itself was inspected and passed by the fire marshal himself. And he also is the one who wrote this open burn policy. He illegally legislated from his position to try to, legislate a policy when he can't. Well, he did it anyways, and then used his subordinates as the enforcement mechanism to enforce this open burn policy. And then they tried to say, well, it was a hazard, it was a nuisance. Well, these have technical definitions, and a hazard would be a life or death situation, which would be another way of saying exigency. And they could, I guess, theoretically, they could make a theory. Well, it could have been a hazard. Well, it wasn't, though. That's the problem. Coulda, shoulda, woulda, and actually, what is two different things oftentimes. And there just simply wasn't any reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime was being committed, but that there was even any sort of danger, right, or hazard, or and we could say, well, let's just play devil's advocate. Okay, it was a nuisance. It wasn't, but violating the Fourth Amendment is never allowed to abate a nuisance, right? So unless you can articulate that somebody's health was in grave danger, immediate danger, which then, of course, that would have been, undercut by the fact that you casually were strolling on the property and taking your time, right? Time clearly wasn't of the essence. You had time to get a warrant. You had time to call the police department. You had time to sit there and talk amongst each other. You had time to get a warrant. You just didn't want to attempt to get one because you knew one wouldn't be granted to you. And so, and you didn't want to follow Chapter 12.1, the Hazards and Nuisances Ordinance, because that affords due process, right? And so what we decided to do was we decided that we're gonna bypass all of those constitutional mechanisms, those lawful mechanisms, because I hate ordinances just as much as the next guy. But Chapter 12.1, as I read it, appears to be a lawful constitutional ordinance. It's not void for vagueness because it affords due process. Well, the open burn policy doesn't cite any due process, and there's no way that a reasonable person could know what conduct is allowed and what conduct is not allowed. A person of average intelligence, which some might say I have slightly above average intelligence, or I think I just have average intelligence, but some believe I have slightly above average, or very above average intelligence. Some people think I'm very smart. And so if that's the case, well, then that further illustrates my point that this is void for vagueness, because there's no way of knowing what conduct could possibly be allowable, right? And the city of Wayne ratified this open burn policy, not legally, but they illegally ratified it, improperly ratified it, by putting it on their city website. right? Effectively, for all intents and purposes, they're ratifying it, but they're not legally ratifying it, right? It's not codified, it's not enforceable, but it is ratified. So it's just kind of one of these quasi gray areas that the courts are going to have to figure out, because as it sits now, I mean, this is, May 9th was clearly unconstitutional. And then, so therefore, you can't interfere. Well, I wasn't interfering anyways. I did not physically touch anyone, intervene with anyone's movement at any time. I just simply protested the fact verbally that this was unconstitutional from a safe distance away, of course. And, because I wouldn't use my garden hose to extinguish a smoldering fire pit, the city gave me this false dichotomy, this ultimatum, essentially, that I'm going to put the fire out with my garden hose, or they're going to put it out for me with their fire truck, right? Which would, obviously theatrical, embarrassing, annoying, harassing, right? That they were going to do that. And then to top it off, for the inconvenience of having to do this, because they're claiming it's an emergency, right? Well, if it's an emergency, why do you want someone who's not trained to suppress fires using a garden hose when you're supposedly trained to suppress fires, fire department, and you have the equipment to do it, right? Or, let's just say if you guys want to use the garden hose because you guys are the experts, like I said, it's kind of like they're arguing against themselves here. And I don't see it ending too well for the city of Wayne. I don't think their argument is such that they think it is. Because if they're also claiming that it's an emergency, that it's an exigency, that it's a nuisance and a hazard, all that. Well, nuisance and hazard, those aren't relatable in the sense that they're not enforced the same way. If something's a safety hazard, if something is a bona fide house is on fire, structure's on fire, flames are within inches, within feet of a structure, the structure is about to catch fire, somebody is on fire, something along that nature, then yeah, that would be a public safety hazard, right? That would be a hazard, right? Which would mean that it would be an exigency, which means that you would need a warrant to enforce it. Unfortunately, there wasn't that for the city, and their own actions undercut that as much because, they're lollygagging around on the property, they're taking their time, they're asking a non-trained disabled veteran to put out to suppress a fire that they're claiming is an emergency. It's such an emergency that they don't want to put it out, they don't want to suppress it. Is it such a, that's what I'm saying. Are they arguing that it's such a big bad emergency that they want to sacrifice me? Right? Like they want to sacrifice me if I get killed or something? Well, it's crazy. No, they're just lazy, and they knew that there was no true emergency, and they knew that it was ridiculous, and they knew that they were going to get sued, and so they wanted to proceed carefully, right? And they were just trying to coerce me into doing their work for them, so then they could say, well, he put it out, he consented. That's how these people operate. Even if they force you to put it out, they're going to say, well, he put it out and no one had a gun to his head, and so he made a conscious decision to put it out, so therefore he gave consent. That's how they would argue that. So, of course, I'm not going to comply with that because it's an unlawful order. And because it's an unlawful order, and I don't consent to it, well, now the city has a conundrum. So now they have to try to argue that that wasn't a search or a seizure. Well, then what were you doing on the property? If you weren't searching for something, why were you there? You were searching the fire pit. You were seizing the fire pit. When you extinguished the fire pit, when you altered the fire pit physically, you seized it. And you searched it clearly because you said it again, you couldn't see on the property. You couldn't make a determination from wherever vantage point you were at, right? So you had to, either step foot on the front, the front yard, the curtilage, or you had to walk and walk and walk into the backyard, into the curtilage, into the woods. So, again, where did you access the property from? Well, you accessed it from a public easement, and you violated property rights to search the property, to search the fire pit. And so, again, I don't know what arguments being deployed here exactly, because it clearly is the curtilage. The fire pit was clearly approved. There's clearly no codified ordinance to enforce. So, and you clearly had time to get if you had, like, just like the fire, it's just, the whole thing is ridiculous, right? The police video is ridiculous. Oh yeah, we're going to charge him with interference. Well, how did he interfere? Well, he said no. Oh, okay. Well, why don't you just put the fire out? That's Sergeant Williams talking. Why don't you just put the fire out? Oh, well, he said no, we couldn't. Okay, so then you respect his right and you leave his property. I don't know what's so, I just failed to see what's so complicated. It seems like the city of Wayne was there trying to instigate. Well, clearly they were there trying to instigate. They were there trying to instigate, harass, embarrass, and annoy me. And that's what they did. And then they put me in jail, arrested me, handcuffed me, put me in jail, and ruined my life. Ruined my life because they were in the wrong, and I guess didn't want to believe that, or didn't want to come to that conclusion. And they wanted to punish my defiance. That's ultimately what it boiled down to. They saw me as a person who was being defiant and not following their demands, right? Because they were unlawful, for one. So I was being defiant. I was out of line in their view, and I had to be punished some way, somehow. They weren't just going to come and put the fire out and leave, No, they were going to, make me pay for it, right? So, just for simply not consenting, not threatening nobody, not interfering, not menacing somebody, not, getting in someone's personal space, and no, just having a camera, recording the entire interaction, and just saying no. That's all you got to do to catch a case in America. Just asserting your property rights will give you a case, right? And then they'll use that to just woefully violate the ever-loving fuck out of your rights and put you in jail, falsely imprison you, and falsely accuse you, and here we are, guys. So, welcome to my reality. Just for simply buying a property, for simply serving my country, being able to afford such a nice property, and then buying said property, and then using said property, using what was approved in the certificate of occupancy. So that's what I got for running for office, and as a write-in, of course, because I had to be. But just for trying to partake in my civic duty, I was subjected to torture, cruel and unusual punishment, 90-some days in jail, and months of house arrest, banished from my house. Living in Montcalm County in a condemned house with a crackhead mother, exposing this to my children, because my family didn't want to be separated like immigrants in our own country. So, what a hell of a way to welcome a lawful immigrant to America, right? My wife waited years to come to this country, paid tens of thousands of dollars to be united with her family. And 2 days after her birthday, her husband's unlawfully arrested, her property rights are viciously violated, and damage has been done. The damage has been done. And now it's time for substantial compensation and acknowledgement that what happened was a violation of the Fourth Amendment, and legally infirm is what it is. So, malicious prosecution, yeah, it's definitely that, but I think there's the vindictive and retaliatory element to it as well. That, typically in these type of cases, you typically wouldn't have that, but in this particular case, I think it fits all three. And I think you can look at this as well from a mother of angles, and it's abundantly clear that there's some improprieties going on in the city of Wayne, Michigan. So hopefully we'll be successful in our efforts, our continual efforts, because we have a lot more work to do. And I again appreciate you guys for support. The really only thing, we got 4 lawsuits that are active. We're trying to get about 4 or 5 more going, maybe 6 more. But we do need your help. We do need your help. So if you guys are able to support the channel, support the eBay store, please, as always. And I thank you guys greatly for tuning in and for continuing to follow this story as it develops. Because there's going to be a lot more developments that are going to be underway. And there's a lot of things that we still haven't even gotten into. Like this. So apparently this is the 11-page ROA. I think this is more than 11 pages, which makes me question, okay, we're at 4, 5, 6. Seven, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, this isn't even what we requested, guys. I mean, this is certainly certainly something that we can certainly something we can use. But no, the judge referenced an 11-page ROA in our last hearing in the transcript on the record, so we would like to obtain that 11. Okay, so we are back. Killjoy, what up, buddy? How you doing? I'm doing all right, buddy. Hold on a second. All right, we are back. Sorry about that. So yeah, you know, this what we've received from the city, or what we've received from the court, this judge is kind of like this chicken scratch. While I do appreciate it, it is not what we are requesting. The court, during our last hearing just a few days ago, the judge discussed an 11-page, he said he had an 11-page, 1-1. He had an 11-page ROA, and he was talking about the absurdity that there was 11-page ROA for a case like this. That's what he had in front of him, an 11-page ROA. Well, I went down to the city of Wayne and pulled the ROAs, and it was only 7 pages or 8 pages, 7 pages, I do believe. So, well, I'm no mathematician, but that's, you know, 3 or 4 pages missing, right? So that's a discrepancy for one. But also I noticed when I was reading the Wayne ROAs that there's, you know, the motion to compel discovery, there were several of those that were just outright omitted. They were ruled on the record, they were granted by the judge, but they're just miraculously missing in its entirety on the City of Wayne ROA. Plus, you know, the page discrepancy. So there's more than enough to plausibly suggest that there's something going on here that's just not making sense, and that requires a further review. So we're here to ensure that that review is, and that audit's being done, you know, that it's being conducted properly, because there's clearly some things that aren't adding up about this case, as the judge alluded to again on the record during the last hearing, that you know, he said he's personally offended that he's associated with this case. It's the most unusual case he's ever had in 18 years of being on the bench. So, you know, when you're making comments like that, kind of gets my spidey senses tingling just a wee bit here. And it is apparent that things need to be looked into a bit further, right? And so, you know, while I do appreciate this register of actions, I don't believe this is the one that was being discussed by the judge, because he did specifically say 11 pages, and this is about 14 pages. So I think there's another ROA. I think there's an ROA. There's got to be an ROA. Everything that the 35th District Court did, and then they need to have something that they sent to the 29th District Court, because the 29th District Court, while it is their case, they're not handling the case. So the ROA is being completed, you know, from what I understand, by both. So it's just not adding up, guys. It's not adding up, and we're not going to sleep until it does. So that's just how we roll. That's how you get accountability, man. It's a grind, right? It's not a clean process, right? Accountability, and you know, that's when people try to hide their, you know, they try to cover shit up and sweep shit under the rug, and there's a lot of shit to it, man. But as always, we'll keep fighting the good fight, because what else can we do, right? We're getting our motions drafted with the circuit court. PPO, a lot of things in the works. And honestly, the reason why we haven't got it done sooner is just because of time, because of constraints. It's just because of money, really. You know, we're trying to keep our head above water, and any extra money that we do get, we devote towards this fight. But you know, just had a second kid, and a lot of shit going on right now. But again, I do appreciate it. If you are able to assist, by all means, but your support is more than enough, guys. And regardless if we gotta wait a little bit longer, a few more weeks, a few more months, we're still gonna do what we're gonna do. So don't for a second think that you're obligated, or that, you know, it's money, right? It is, but it ain't. It's really just time. With enough time, we're gonna have the money, and we're gonna file the lawsuits. But I know you guys get a little antsy. I know you guys do get a little, you know, you guys want to see updates, and you know, as do I. And believe me, we're filing as fast as we can, but we also have, you know, we have to review everything by ourselves. And you know, not to say that we can't submit something in a complaint that, you know, had an error or two in it, but we don't like to make that a process, right? We don't like to make that a habit, because you never know with what type of judge you're going to get. You never know with what their policies or their rules are, or just their precedents, how they do things. And so you always want to make sure it's as accurate as humanly possible, as thorough and as detailed as humanly possible. But it's a balance, right? It's a fine line between throwing too much at the court and not throwing enough at them, right? So of course, we're gonna do what we got to do to get swift justice. But these things take a while, guys. But just rest assured that we're doing everything we can. And with enough patience and some good luck and some prayers, I think we can win every one of these lawsuits. We had court again yesterday, and it went well. The certificate of occupancies is clearly a issue that the court wants to know about. Justice for me and my family. I was the victim of 5 warrantless break-ins of my property to enforce a law that doesn't actually exist. No warrant, no knock, no nothing. Just 5 break-ins and over 90 days in jail for the trouble of it, and just for asserting my rights, you know. It was an open burn policy. The city of Wayne, instead of following their, they have an ordinance called Chapter 12.1. It's their hazards and nuisances ordinance. It's very short. It's about half a page. And it goes over, you know, if something's deemed a hazard or a nuisance by the city council, that there's certain steps that the city can take to abate that hazard or nuisance. Well, instead of following that protocol, which is lawful, by the way, they decided to enforce an open burn policy, or what they call policy for controlled fires in the city of Wayne. So the fire department, fire marshal, so the fire department and the engineering department are in the same building, so it's the same people, right? But basically the fire marshal, who works down in the building and engineering and fire department office, in 2022 he passed the fire pit in a certificate of occupancy inspection. So he approved this fire pit, but then years before he approved this fire pit, he wrote this open burn policy and signed his name on it. And then the city, instead of codifying it, because it's so poorly written that it wouldn't be able to be codified in the law, they decided instead of codifying it, they were just going to throw it up on their city website and just call it their policy, right? Well, I don't know why they did that. I guess because they're lazy and they're incompetent and they're stupid and they don't think, you know, a day ahead or something. But they just left it as is, and then basically the status quo continued in the city of Wayne. I don't know how old this policy is. We're trying to gather when it was written, although the city of Wayne has obstructed the attainment of that information through various FOIAs, which were, of course, filing lawsuits to obtain this information. But essentially, the city doesn't want us to know. Well, I'm guessing that it was probably before COVID, right? This open burn policy was written. We could easily find out based on the city of Wayne archives, right? We could figure out, you know, when it was put on their website or whatever. But bottom line is on their city website, it's listed as open burn policy, but then they incorrectly call it an ordinance. They like to be loose with their language. The city of Wayne, they're really good with void for vagueness language. And what that means is they'll use these terms interchangeably to try to confuse you, and basically a way to conveniently violate your rights, right? That's all this is. This is all these ordinances are written. They're written to basically to give plausibility to low IQ retarded employees, right? Rank and file employees read these ordinances, and these ordinances are written unconstitutionally. And the cities know that, right? The cities know that these ordinances are written in a way that violate the vagueness doctrine. But they do it anyways because they're anticipating that 99, probably over 99% of people are either not educated on their rights or don't have the means or the ability, whether it be financially, intellectually or financially, or they just don't have the persistence to see out their rights, right? So they just comply. So this is basically what happened in the city of Wayne. So Jeremy Schneider, the fire marshal, he passed this open burn policy sometime before, sometime in the past, in the 2020s or 2010s or whatever. I'm thinking somewhere in the 2010s. And the city, instead of ratifying it, they just threw it on their city website and called it a day. Well, that's not how it works, guys. That's not due process, and that's not, in compliance with the 4th or the 14th Amendment. And so basically the city enforced this open burn policy for years, right, against people, and I guess nobody ever questioned it. Basically what I was told, and this is on video, but I was told, my wife was told this, several people were told this from the fire chief, not the fire marshal, but the guy above him, the top official. He said that basically the policy is as such. You're allowed to have an open burn, you're allowed to barbecue, you're allowed to use your chimney on your house. You're allowed to ignite wood, organic material. You're allowed to do that, firewood, as long as nobody complains about it. The second somebody complains about it, there's no reference to the validity of the complaint. Basically, if somebody makes any complaint at all, doesn't matter how trivial, doesn't matter how unbelievable it is, doesn't matter if it's even physically impossible, right, what they're accusing. If they complain, the fire department's going to show up at your doorstep. Then that's a good scenario. Most of the time they're just going to show up in your backyard unannounced. But the fire department's going to respond, and they're going to abate the fire. They're going to make you put the fire out. They're going to make you put this fire out. And if you don't put it out, then they're going to put it out for you. And then I guess they're going to charge you for it, either criminally or monetarily, or both, right? They're going to charge you for the pleasure, right? For having to respond, right? So basically that's what we were told. I was told that if your neighbor's smoking a cigar, this is what the fire chief gave to me as an example. If your neighbor is smoking a cigar on their back porch, and you're offended by the odor or the smell, and you deem it to be a nuisance, that you can call them and they will make them put it out. I swear to God, guys, I said I couldn't even believe what I was hearing. I said that is the most ridiculous fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. But that came right out of the fire chief's mouth. He said flat out, if I'm smoking a cigar on my deck and my neighbor's offended by it, I have to put the fire out. He used himself as an example. I said, there is no fucking way in hell. There is no fucking way in hell. So yeah, by that logic, if you use a chimney, 2/3 of the houses or more in the city of Wayne have a chimney or a fireplace. So you can't use your fireplace by this logic. You can't have a smoker. You can't have a barbecue, okay? Because those all omit smoke, right? You can't have a campfire. You can't have a bonfire. You can't have a cooking fire. Because somebody could be offended by the sight of it, not even just the odor or the smell, right? Just by the mere fact that you have one and they don't. Any complaint at all does not matter. The details, the validity to it. If somebody complains, you have got to put the fire out. That's what we were told. That's what I was told. And well, that's clearly the most ridiculous policy ever. And that's not what their open burn policy actually says. Their open burn policy, it really contradicts itself and makes you more confused than anything. But there's some things in it that are pretty objective. Okay, you got to be 50 feet from a structure. Okay, well, we were within 50 feet. We were in a city-approved fire pit. A fire pit that the city approved. And there was absolutely no basis for the enforcement, right? But basically what the city of Wayne did is they enforced this open burn policy against people for a long time. and they said that we go out to people's houses all the time over bonfires, and they just comply. They just put it out. No, I don't think that's true, Killjoy. I don't think that's true, buddy. I don't think I've never read an ordinance that says you can't burn firewood in a fireplace. I've never heard that. I've read the city ordinances and the charter front to back several times, and no such law actually exists. So that's I don't know where you're getting that information from. I don't know if you're asking that as a question, but no, that's factually infirm. That's inaccurate. That's not the case. That is not the case, guys. So there's never been, to my knowledge, there used to be an ordinance years ago, 1278, 1278.07. Those ordinances, one was air pollution and odors that may be offensive to neighbors. And again, those two were void for vagueness anyways, because there's no basically there's got to be an objective criteria. What makes something a hazard? What makes something a nuisance? There's got to be an objective parameter. How much smoke, right? How much impact does it got to have? Where do you draw the line between, lawful and unlawful, right? These ordinances have to spell them out if they want to be enforceable. But see, the city realizes that that's too much work, I guess. And they just go, well, fuck it. We're just going to pass an ordinance anyways. And then you have to go after the fact and argue that it's unconstitutional or it's void for vagueness. But they basically get to pass these they know these are unconstitutional ordinances, and they know they violate the Constitution. But they allow people to, the government allows these municipalities to pass these ordinances without any sort of consequence. It doesn't matter how unconstitutional they are, it doesn't matter how obvious it is, which in my opinion violates good faith, right? But they pass these clearly unconstitutional ordinances, and then they try to enforce them against you. And then you have to argue after the fact that it's unconstitutional or it's void for vagueness or whatever, unreasonable, what have you. But I mean, this ordinance that the city of Wayne just passed, 2025-02, it literally gives the unfettered permission to come and violate your Fourth Amendment. That we're going to come on your property, search and seize it. We give ourselves authority to do it. We ratify that behavior. And that's fucking crazy. That's crazy. And of course I'm going to challenge that. And there's nothing more that I could do, right? I mean, the settlement would have to be so crazy. The settlement would have to be beyond any wild measure, right? The settlement would have to be so lucrative that you'd be a fool not to take it, for me to take it at this point, with some of these issues. Some of these issues, I would rather lose and just have the courts declare certain aspects of what they're doing unconstitutional. I would rather lose and fight than settle and win, right? And so, in my position, I don't want to settle, right? Now, if you're going to give me everything that I want and everything that you should be giving everybody, I'll be more than happy to use my property as an example for people of, hey, this is what you should have the right to do, right? You should have the right to put up any sign, any size, whatever you want, without even thought that the government is going to do something against you for doing it. And but at the end of the day, I filed these lawsuits to fight. I filed these lawsuits to fight the injustices and the corruption. So it's more important to me, but also in the same respect too, if I can, obtain a nice settlement, a settlement I couldn't refuse, let's say, well, then that funds me to fight for another day, right? That funds the operation for years to come. So, it is a value judgment at the end of the day, but like I said, the more and more that the city of Wayne continues to engage in clearly unlawful, corrupt, unconstitutional behavior and antics, the more that I'm going to double down and triple down and quadruple down, and the more I'm going to fight the good fight, because at the end of the day, guys, that's what we're put on earth to do. We're put on earth to fight evil, and I view this as evil. Can't heat with wood in Wayne, that was the question. No, you absolutely can, Killjoy. So you had a fire in your yard 4 times. More than 4 times. I had a fire in my yard dozens of times. But over 6 times, I believe 7 times actually total, if I'm not mistaken. If I remember correctly, 7 times total, the city responded and actually initiated contact. They were dispatched to my house. But they drove by my house dozens of times, like trying to intimidate me and trying to threaten me and trying to harass me. And we drove by, and because they had to, they got to sprinkle some plausible deniability in it, right? Well, we drove by a few times and we didn't stop, so therefore that proves that we're not singling them out. It's bullshit, right? That's their, that's how these people think, because they're retards. They think anyone's believing that garbage. And the fact is that we all know better. We all know now, right? Especially, like, that's why I didn't fight this, like when they were trying to offer me these ridiculous pleas, guys, it's like, it's a fine line, right? Because I'm pro se, I don't know the law, I'm not a lawyer, but at the same time, I know what they're doing is unlawful. And it's like, I want to show the world, right? This is what the city of Wayne will do. They'll force you into a plea no matter what. They'll withhold video discovery for 6 months. Video discovery that totally exonerates you and totally, he's sitting in jail, because what they do with people is they bank on the fact that you're not an attorney, you don't know your rights, right? Most people, until you're actually in this system, you don't have a clue about the corruption that goes on, and how these proceedings work and how to file these motions and all this shit, right? The average person doesn't know how to do this. But after you're in the system for a few months and you have attorneys that are not representing you properly, you're like, okay, I showed you that this isn't a codified ordinance, Jermaine Warwick. Why are you going in there and arguing that I'm following the ordinance? Why are you calling it an ordinance, for one, when it's factually not? Legally, it's not an ordinance. It's nothing. It's basically tissue paper. But you're going in there saying, oh no, we're following this tissue paper. We're following this ordinance. I mean, it's malpractice is what it is, right? And we have to, it's malpractice, and we have to, like, once you realize how bad you're getting fucked, you kind of go, okay, well, I know I'm getting fucked, and I know they're overplaying their hand, and they're admitting that they haven't given this discovery, and the judge won't impose sanctions, though. So what do? Well, I guess at that point, you just continue to illustrate the absurdity of what they're doing. And so right before they offer a plea, they admit that they haven't given over discovery, but they will, right? But they will after I take a plea, right? Which is like, it's so illegal. It's so fucking illegal, right? That, and they're going to keep me in jail till February 1st, right? They're going to keep me in jail until February 1st. I've already served 90 some days. I've already served the sentence, but they're going to keep me in jail longer, right? To force me to take a plea or wait for trial, right? And then, of course, are you given, like, as a pro se defendant, are you given a real ability to defend yourself from within the jail? Of course not. You don't have access to anything. And so you're like, okay, well, how am I going to be pro se if you're going to prevent me from having, paper, pens, a scanner, AI to help me, a printer, right, a computer, legal access, real legal access, not on some bullshit tablet, you know, where you got to pay for it and beg someone to charge it and all that, you know, all that fucking bullshit. But we're actually talking like, you know, a real chance to defend yourself pro se, right? And no, I mean, right before the pleas entered, right? They'll openly, like, it's all right there, right? No way of being able to represent yourself, which I want to. I want to represent myself. Absolutely want to represent myself. You know, because William J. Mays and Jermaine Warwick aren't interested in doing it. You know, they're not interested in that. They're interested in dragging it out. You know, not in the sense, they're not interested in ending it, even though they could have ended it at any time and just said, well, hey, there's no codified ordinance here to enforce, which means there's no lawful basis to be on the property on May 9th, which means it's not possible that someone could have, you know, broken a law that doesn't exist. Can't interfere with the enforcement of something that doesn't exist. If there's no possibility that the city had, you know, any lawful basis to be on the property, which they didn't, then there's no way to interfere with them, right? Because there's nothing lawful about what they did, right? Which means it's all void ab initio, which means that, you know, it's all constitutionally infirm, right? Because the very beginning of it was constitutionally infirm. So therefore, you know, the charges, the bond conditions, all of that was because there was no basis for the encounter to begin with, right? And there's no codified ordinance, which means you can't enforce something that isn't there, right? Can't, you know, so that's why it's called a phantom ordinance. And so, yeah, while they're also withholding video discovery for months, right? So, official video discovery. So, it'll be an interesting thing to. It'll be an interesting thing to watch. Watch the city try to explain themselves, right? Oh well, how do you withhold video discovery for 6 months and then, you know, ask for a plea, right? Because they asked for a plea. Kerry Miller asked for a plea back in, I think it was July of 25. Oh well, we're interested in a pre-veterans court. No, I'm not interested in nothing. I've never been interested in nothing because there's no lawful basis for the encounter to begin with. There never was, right? And of course they disposed of all those charges, which means, hey, malicious prosecution. And of course, just the simple fact that the video evidence clearly demonstrates, no, I never interfered with nobody. That's not even something to make an argument about. It's just a simple fact, right? That's why they withheld the video discovery for so long. You know, and the fact that the officers themselves say that it's a loose charge, and how are we going to spin this? How are we going to lie and spin this, right? I mean, you know, no wonder you withheld it for so long. So, of course, you know, like, I'm willing to be the sacrificial lamb, right? I'm willing to fall on the sword here. And I guess a lot of people are. But it is, it's not without its challenges, so. Jack Barry 6986. How much do you want for your glasses? Man, these, you could probably get these for a couple $100. These Ray-Bans. These Ray-Bans, you could probably get these for a couple $100. Poop and pee, I don't know. Yeah, you should do that every once in a while. It's good for you. How much you want for your glasses? I don't know. I'd probably want about $300 for them, but I'd probably take $200. But you can get your own for that price, damn near. I'm gay. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm very sorry to hear that, buddy. City of Bobby, job. Oh yeah, well, these people's jobs, obviously they should never be allowed to practice law, because clearly they're practicing it. And I say that in the sense of like, yeah, they're really practicing it, all right.